Okay, so these are the chapters 1 and 2 of The Great Gatsby notes for the class. Remember, you are responsible for copying down these notes. These are notes that you can use on any quiz or test for the book. So it's best that you have these in your own writing. Okay, so what I've done for these notes is I've broken up the first two chapters by character. And these are either direct quotes that have to do with the characters, or these are a synopsis of certain aspects of those chapters that reveal something about the character. And off to the side where it says significance, I do briefly list the significance of each of the things that were picked. And I'll elaborate on that as we get to it. Okay, so the first character for chapters 1 and 2 that is significant for The Great Gatsby is that of Nick Carraway. Now, he is the narrator of the book. And on the very first page, there's a direct quote that Nick gives that is from his father. And it's a piece of advice with his father. And his father had said to him, whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in the world haven't had the advantages that you've had. Now, that is sound advice on the surface. And I went over this in talking about themes for the book. It is sound advice on the surface. However, Nick takes this advice too literally, and it will be a part of a conflict that he will be struggling with, because he's going to struggle not to judge characters, not to judge his friends, because he's trying to uphold his father's advice. Yet he is surrounded by characters that have some serious flaws. They're involved in things that are illegal, immoral, and he really should make judgments based upon what these people are doing. And you'll see how that unfolds as the book goes on. Now, for the character of Nick, on page 3 of the book, you do learn a little bit about his family. You learn that his family is very prominent. They're very well-to-do people from the Middle West, and they have had money for 3 generations. Now, notice in the book, it never does actually say Yale. It does say for Nick that he is a graduate from a school in New Haven, Connecticut. That is where Yale University is located. Nick, being an Ivy League graduate, has opportunities afforded to him that other people would not have. And that's still true for this to this day. People who go to Ivy League schools, Cornell, Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, etc., those schools are very prestigious. They're world renowned. And oftentimes connections can be made through the schools you attend. The connection that he's made specifically is Tom Buchanan, who we'll get to. He's another character we'll get to in a moment. But he is a graduate of Yale. Now, it's important to note that his family has had money, and it says for 3 generations. That makes Nick what is referred to as old money. In this book, how long you've had your money is very important. He is wealthy, and he was born into wealth. That's where they get the idea of old money. That is the top of the social structure for this time period. People who were born into money were viewed as having the most prestige. People who were new money, and we will meet characters with that as well, that's first generation wealthy. They were not as well received as old money people. And that really has to do with many of the new money people made their money through less than legitimate sources during this time period of the 1920s. And we'll get to that as the book goes on. But it's very important to understand that Nick is old money, and we will go over more of the old money aspects as the book goes on. Old money people, he and his friends, they are a social circle. They're a very insulated social circle. So you'll see that as the book goes on. Now, and the last thing I have for Nick is Nick has moved east from the Middle West to become a bondman. In effect, he's working on Wall Street. He is very proud of the fact that he has this job. Now, he is 29 years old, So it's not like he's right out of college. He's been out of school for quite a while. And he's very proud of the fact that he has this job. He is annoyed at Tom, a classmate of his from Yale, who asks specifically where his job is and then condescendingly says, nah, I never heard of the bond firm. So he is annoyed at that. He's proud of the fact that he has this job. He doesn't need to work because he was born into to money and he has money. Interesting, though, too, it is very unsurprising, really, for the time period that Nick is not surprised to learn that Tom is unfaithful to his wife. Now, remember, his wife, Tom's wife, Daisy, that's Nick's cousin. But he's not surprised at that. He is surprised to realize just how racist Tom is. And that'll be something that we'll be discussing as the book goes on as well. There is an underlying theme in this book of prejudice. You'll see that. It has to do with, at times, religion. It has to do with social class, where you live. So you'll see that as we go along. Now, I do have something, and this is unique for the chapters 1 and 2 notes. I do have things starred at the end of each section because I want you to understand that this is something that's going to be carried out throughout the entire book. Nick in this book is probably the most moral of the characters. Now, he is flawed. He absolutely is flawed. He's not perfect. But he is, of the characters, probably the most moral. It talks about how he's sensitive to fundamental decencies, and he very much wants to keep the world at its uniform moral attention that it is at right now. He doesn't really respond well to change. So you'll see that as the book goes on, and it does actually help explain why he reacts the way he reacts as the book unfolds. All right, so the next two characters I actually put together because they are married. They each have a connection to Nick, and we'll go over that as well in the course of the book. So let's start first with Tom. Tom was a classmate of Nick's at Yale. He is also Daisy's husband. Daisy is Nick's distant cousin. Tom was a football player at Yale. At the time, they would have been at Yale in the 1910s, around then. Ivy League football was the football, right? We did not see University of Miami or LSU or something like with huge football programs. I'm not even sure if they had football programs at that point. But if you were an athlete, you were an outstanding football player, you were going to the Ivy Leagues to play. So he was a natural athlete, football player, still physically is the size of a football player. So he is physically intimidating. Now, his family is also enormously wealthy. He, too, is old money. He has been born into money. It never goes into how long his family has had the money, but it is definitely old money. He's from old money. Interesting, there's a quote in this section about Tom and Daisy and the fact that they drifted east after a year in France. So they've lived all over the world. And the word drifted really gives insight to the lifestyle that Daisy and Tom have. To drift means that you're just moving aimlessly around. There's no sense of direction. Think of like a feather floating in the air. It'll drift from place to place. That's kind of how Tom and Daisy are in their life. They don't really need to work. They can spend a year abroad on vacation. So there really is a parallel here with their lifestyle kind of being adrift. That lack of focus is also going to be shown through their lack of morals. And you'll see that as the book unfolds. You'll see that with a lot of the plot. Okay, so description of Tom, what he looks like. He is described as a sturdy, straw-haired or blonde man of 30 years old. He has a hard mouth, supercilious, and I define that for you. That just means air of superiority manner to him. He has arrogant eyes. He has a cruel body and contemptuous voice. Contemptuous means full of hate. He also is a racist, and that was addressed when he was saying to Nick how disappointed he is that he feels that the white race is becoming submerged. And, I think with the character of Tom, he's afraid to lose his status where he is. Now, Myrtle Wilson, who we will meet in this section too, that is his mistress. It's not unusual for a man like Tom, a man of his social class, to be married but also have a mistress. Usually the mistresses do not come from the same social class, and Myrtle is actually middle class, not upper class, much less old money wealthy. So that's his description. He looks like the all-American person. Now, Daisy's description. Daisy is a woman who is younger than Tom. She's about 23, 24 years old. Usually when you see her in this book, she's going to be dressed in white. White is very symbolic. Lots of colors in this book have symbolic meanings to them. White is a symbol of innocence or purity. That's kind of ironic for Daisy because she is neither innocent nor pure. Her voice murmurs so that people actually have to lean into her to hear her. She does that intentionally. There is a statement that she makes because Tom and Daisy have a daughter. She makes a statement after she had her baby girl that she hopes she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in the world. Now, ironically, that actual sentence there, that sentiment, was actually said by F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda, when they had their daughter. And it really is a statement that indicates the social class that they are. She's not saying per se, I hope her daughter is an idiot. That's not what she means by fool there. She's talking about ignorance. She wants her daughter insulated so that she doesn't have to worry about anything in the world. Remember, when this book takes place, they're not too far removed from World War I. And that was the war to end all wars. And people came home from that war. They wanted to live their lives. They wanted to be happy. They didn't want to have to ever experience something like that again. So what Daisy's talking about here is really having a daughter who can be insulated from all the world's evils. If you have enough money, you don't have to care about anything. And that's what she's really hoping for her daughter. That's the lifestyle that Daisy really has at this point. And the last thing for Daisy, and it's very minor, but it says a lot about her relationship with her husband. Daisy actually has bruised knuckles, and she blames Tom. She actually says, that's what I get for marrying a brute of a man. That alludes to or implies that Daisy and Tom physically have fought with one another, and her knuckles are bruised, possibly from punching Tom. So their marriage on the surface looks one way, but behind closed doors, there's definitely abuse. And we do know that Tom is definitely cheating on Daisy as well. So that's what I have starred below, where it says the contrast between Tom and Daisy's appearance really versus the reality of it is very stunning. It's so not consistent. They're old money people, but no matter how much money you have, you're not going to inherit class or morals. That's something that you have to develop through how you're raised, through how you live your life. And Daisy and Tom, you're going to see over the course of this book, that's not how they are. So they are going to drift from place to place without really consequence or care. They have the money that will allow them to do whatever they want. And if they mess up, they have the money that can buy them out of the problems as well. They do feel very superior to those from lower social classes as they, and they do believe that people with new money, first generation wealthy, they very much are superior to the new money people. All right, so that's the first page of the notes for chapters 1 and 2, covering those 3 characters. So again, make sure that you have those things in your notebook because you are allowed to use those for any test or quiz for the book. And I'll get to part 2 in just a moment.